Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hi, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, April 10th, 2018, and this calendar thing is a total witch hunt. Nothing is happening, of course. There's no news whatsoever today. I guess the first order of business, besides telling you, of course, that Daily Co's Radio is live now. Thanks to Bill in Portland, Maine, for letting me know and letting the rest of you know. Daily Co's Radio is live now this morning. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, demonstrates 17 ways the FBI may have kicked in Michael Cohen's door. Number 5 will shock you. I got to get into that business. Writing those ads seems like, I don't know, I guess it must be lucrative. Although I guess if it was really lucrative, they wouldn't have to do so many of them. But in volume, it makes sense. Anyway, we got to catch up today. I guess we'd have to say that the big story of the day carries over from yesterday afternoon, evening, what was it, that we found out, probably late evening, that the news broke that earlier in the day, the FBI actually had some activity going on. The FBI raided the offices of Michael Cohen, the one, which Michael Cohen, which of the 17,000 Michael Cohens who have been wrongly identified and tweeted to excessively with taunting tweets. The one who is the lawyer for Donald Trump, of course. They raided his office, and hey, man, I don't know. They seized some sort of evidence, apparently in connection with accusations, let's say, of bank fraud was included. Campaign finance fraud was included, and ostensibly all related, actually, believe it or not, to the Stormy Daniels case. And, I mean, wow. That and some other reasons, I guess, led the Department of Justice to kick this one up to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and I guess the New York FBI field office, rather than conducting them under the auspices of the special counsel and the main FBI, main justice, as they would call it, I guess. Main FBI headquarters being different from main justice. They are in two different buildings, though the Federal Bureau of Investigation, of course, part of the Department of Justice. Anyway, long story short, his office got raided. They removed all sorts of stuff. And the big question mark still is, what exactly is it all about? How does it relate? And it may not, in the sense that, believe it or not, Donald Trump wishes it would relate. He, of course, lashed out yesterday in a unhinged rant, televised at that, and said some things which probably shouldn't have been said. And although I didn't view the video, those who did on occasion describe the audience reaction, that is to say, those people live and in the room with him. That was his national security cabinet, appeared ashen-faced, it is said, at his pronouncements. We'll talk about what his pronouncements were. It may just be that they are ashen-faced all the time. Certainly ass-faced. We know that. John Bolton was in the room. That gigantic white mustache, I think, probably reflects a lot of light very badly. He's always going to look ashen-faced. He's going to look like there's a big glob of ashes stuck underneath his nose on his upper lip. So I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to those descriptions of what was going on, but certainly the rant was unhinged. We'll have a 2-hour unhinged rant about those rants and try and catch up on the stories. The big news on the unhinged front was, of course, his pronouncement that this was a huge violation of some sort of attorney-client privilege, but more to the point that this was, he considered it to be, an attack on the country, which is, huge red flag alarm bell for, weird authoritarian thinking that a friend of yours, and perhaps more importantly, an attorney of yours, had their offices raided at all, should constitute an attack on America. Why? Because I'm the president of the United States, and as such, I'm very important, and I am the state. And if you attack me, then you're attacking our country. And of course, that's just sort of a telltale sign, a canary in the coal mine, if you will, with respect to dangerous authoritarian thinking. I don't need to dive very far into that one for this audience. I think you know that very well. And so we'll just note it for the record. And then I guess we could get into, there are many, many explainers available out there on Twitter and elsewhere explaining why it is not, in fact, a violation of attorney-client privilege to have conducted this raid, and some great descriptions in the early reporting on it, on what sort of hurdles have to be overcome in getting a search warrant issued for the premises of an attorney to one of the subjects of interest, if not a target, of an investigation like this. It really is a relatively extraordinary thing to do for a number of reasons, not many of which really have anything to do with what the Trump defenders, I think, had to say about it. That is, they don't understand attorney-client privilege any better than anybody else, certainly. It's amazing that Trump knows the words for it, but I imagine it has come up a lot before, and it's something that I am sure he has misunderstood for a long time. And he probably, if you dig deep enough, and really searching the office of his lawyer might be just that, you would probably find an extended history of Donald Trump thinking that he could forever bury evidence of a crime or any crimes that in which he might have been involved, or anything that he suspects other people might consider to be crimes. There's very little he would think that he did would constitute a crime. I doubt whether he would fess up to that. But essentially, I'm sure it's his belief that if he were to commit a crime, if he were, for instance, to shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, if he were to give the murder weapon to his attorney, or really any attorney, I'm sure in his mind, then, and there's actually some argument for that, but we won't get into that. If he turned the evidence over to an attorney, that evidence could never be produced in court because attorney-client privilege. And of course, that is in fact a misunderstanding of how the thing works. No surprise that it's a position he probably holds. But anyway, there really are a few additional considerations for having conducted this raid, but from all appearances, believe it or not, the attorneys at the Department of Justice were extraordinarily careful and appear to have gone above and beyond to make sure that there weren't any footholds for complaints on what people like Donald Trump and law and order types would ordinarily call technicalities, whereas the rest of us might, view it as civil liberties. They view these things as technicalities when the defendant is someone else. Like I said, I've said it in the past. I'm reminded of my law school professor, and I cannot remember which one it was, and I don't even know if the joke was original to him. I doubt it. Doesn't sound like it. But old law school / lawyer joke that what is it? It's not even a law school joke. It's really more of a law and order type person joke that they say a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged, right? I'm all for civil liberties and make sure everybody gets their due process, etc. And once they're mugged, they want to execute people, and are for rounding up suspects on the street and beating a confession out of them because they're sure they're guilty. That's the thinking, which is also terrible thinking, by the way. But the other joke went, a A liberal, or perhaps a civil libertarian, is a conservative who's been indicted, or whose friend has been indicted. I think they were very kind in putting it that way in law school, and we're seeing it happen now. Anyway, now he's worried about technicalities and attorney-client privilege. But like I said, it seems like the DOJ went out of their way to do this very carefully. And let's see. Got plenty of reporting to back that up. And I'll share one of them with you. But let's see. I'm trying to see is there anything that we ought to do by way of laying the groundwork first? Well, let's go right to that part. The special care with which the search was approached. This by Philip Bump in the Washington Post. Headline, "To search Michael Cohen's home." Oh dear, I have to click out of a dialog box. This is a weird dialog box that shows up. I'll finish the headline since I never do that. "To search Michael Cohen's home and office, the FBI had to clear a higher than normal bar." So let's talk about that. But first, the pop-up box. You know how it is on the Washington Post. When you click onto a page, it tells you, or a story, it tells you what section it's from, politics. And then it says afterwards, analysis, or sometimes opinion, designating the type of writing that it is. I guess in an effort to reduce the number of complaint letters that they get by saying, "You're totally biased." And then you say right up there, up the top, it says opinion. Well, if you scroll over the word analysis, I guess it pops up a dialog box that tells you what they think analysis is. So don't complain about the following things. Except the dialog box does not disappear. Once you scroll off of it, you have to just X out of it. And it will appear right over whatever you're reading, in this case, the headline. By the way, what's analysis? Just out of curiosity, interpretation of the news based on evidence, including data, as well as anticipating how events might unfold based on past events. There you have it, in case you were wondering. Another one of those fabulous services, like when in the early days of the internet, major newspapers knew that they were supposed to include links in their stories because they saw bloggers doing it, and they would link to things like President Barack Obama today said, and they would link Barack Obama, and you click on it, and it would tell you who Barack Obama was by giving you a collection of stories about Barack Obama in the Washington Post. They really get the internet, That's why they're making millions of dollars, these newspapers. Anyway, to search Michael Cohen's home and office, the FBI had to clear a higher than normal bar. Here's what we don't know. We don't know specifically what the FBI was looking for, and that may have changed since yesterday afternoon. We don't know specifically what the FBI was looking for when it raided the office of Michael Cohen, high-profile attorney for the Trump Organization. We don't know what they found. We don't know what investigations might be bolstered or curtailed, could happen, by the evidence they seized. What we do know, though, is interesting enough. The raid, which covered Cohen's office and, according to the Wall Street Journal, his home, and a Manhattan hotel room, also, included the seizure of information about the payment made to porn star Stormy Daniels, so we say adult performer, Stormy Daniels, shortly before the 2016 election, and it included communications between Cohen and President Trump, meaning it included communications between an attorney and his client. That is interesting, and that's, I guess, what they were ranting and raving about. But yeah, this is ostensibly about Stormy Daniels. Big question mark. Why? Who cares? People instantly asking, well, what does Mueller care about that? That's not within his purview. We can certainly get that dismissed. There's absolutely no excuse. There's nothing in the Rod Rosenstein memo that says Stormy Daniels ought to be included. And I'm sure that the words Stormy Daniels do not appear in any of his memos, but I'm sure there are some places where it's arguable that it could be brought under his purview. But I think, well, that's part of the reason why they kicked this thing up to New York. It's of interest, but maybe directly, insofar as it's about Stormy Daniels, not to Mueller until further facts are developed, and then maybe you might be able to shoehorn it into his investigation. Or maybe not. Maybe it never gets under his purview. But it's apparently of interest to law enforcement officials elsewhere nonetheless. Let's read on. That last point, that is to say the one that Bump made about it, the seizure including communications between an attorney and his client, also means that the bar for obtaining a warrant was higher than normal. And yeah, we should probably note at this point, as I'm sure this article does, that this was done under a warrant. That means that a judge was consulted and evidence was presented that would convince that judge not only that the search was warranted, well, in the other sense of the word, but permissible and necessary to law enforcement efforts, but also that, the usual presumption of privilege needed to be pierced for some specific reason. And perhaps we'll get to that, but it should also be noted, as I'm sure this article does say, or if it doesn't, we'll recap it, who were these judges and who were these federal prosecutors who brought this stuff forward. And the answer is, of course, Trump nominated at least the U.S. attorney there in the Southern District of New York. That's a Trump appointee. I don't know who the judge was, but as I recall last night, there was some discussion that that judge may also have been a Trump appointee, although I'm not certain that that's the case. And there's probably somewhat limited numbers. It would be, not an extraordinary coincidence if it ended up being a Trump appointed judge, but it'd be up there in terms of coincidence. But anyway, Monday's raid. Oh, I shouldn't skip this paragraph here. An attorney for Cohen, and remember, he's got to have a battery of attorneys, this attorney, told the Washington Post that the search was related to an investigation referred to the Justice Department by Special Counsel Robert Mueller III, in case you didn't know which Robert Mueller did it. In March, the Post reported that Cohen had caught Mueller's eye, with the special counsel's team questioning witnesses about Cohen's actions and requesting documents from Trump's attorney. Monday's raid, though, was conducted at the direction of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, not the special counsel. Last week, Mueller's team revealed in a court filing that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who in May 2017 appointed Mueller to serve in his current position, had outlined in a memo last August particular areas for the special counsel's team to investigate. Mueller could expand those boundaries, but only after getting Rosenstein's approval. In this case, it seems Rosenstein referred the question to the U.S. attorney instead. There are specific rules that come into play before the U.S. attorney would be granted a subpoena, as outlined in the U.S. Attorney's Manual. A section titled "Searches of Premises for subject attorneys," not the attorneys of subjects, but subject attorneys, details, and that's important, 6 additional safeguards to ensure that the Justice Department isn't unjustly violating attorney-client privilege. It applies to subject attorneys, people, that is, attorneys, who are suspects, subjects, or targets of an investigation. You understand very clearly what we're talking about here? Not the attorneys of subjects, but subject attorneys. That is, attorneys who should be taking care to steer clear of such things, but attorneys who, as attorneys, are nonetheless, in fact, the subject or suspect or targets of an investigation themselves. They may also be representing other suspects, subjects, or targets, and that's often how they get involved in this way, but they are subjects themselves. In other words, the attorney himself or herself is suspected of some particular wrongdoing in this case, sometimes related to something they're working on, sometimes not, something of their own volition that they have undertaken that constitutes a crime, whether they're attorneys or not. And ordinarily that wouldn't stand in the way, but attorneys love to try and be clever. And the fact that they're attorneys usually leads them first to try to claim attorney-client privilege with someone, even if it's a crime they committed of their own volition, they try desperately to tie it to some client-related activity and therefore claim privilege on it. And if it's a bank robbery, it rarely works. Anyway, so as we said, it applies to subject attorneys, people who are attorneys, who are suspects, subjects, or targets of an investigation. That distinction was highlighted last week when the Post reported that Mueller had informed Trump that the president wasn't a target of the investigation, but only a subject of it. Not that much difference in terms of discomfort when you're being investigated, but a different word is used. Prosecutors view someone as a subject when that person has engaged in conduct that is under investigation, but there is not sufficient evidence, at the time anyway, to bring charges, the Post wrote at that point. In other words, Trump wasn't necessarily about to face charges, but he was under investigation. The same, it seems, now applies to Cohen. Now, to obtain that search warrant, then, the U.S. attorney would have had to meet 6 conditions, according to the manual. 1. Before obtaining a search warrant, investigators had to try to obtain the evidence in another way, such as by subpoena. 2. The authorization for the warrant had to come from either the U.S. attorney or an assistant attorney general. Rosenstein is deputy attorney general, a higher position than assistant attorney general, and so I guess that bar is cleared. Not that that wouldn't be a point of contention for a desperate lawyer. They may say, if the manual says either a U.S. attorney or an assistant attorney general, and it didn't come from either one of those two, then you're finished. But of course, if it came from a higher up official, the logic says it should work, and therefore the courts will generally say, yeah, that's fine. But that doesn't necessarily mean a lawyer couldn't point, a bad one, even a good one, looking to make trouble or cause delay or require additional consideration of things, or just needing the ability to say, we are contesting this for 5 minutes. Right? Anyway. 3. The prosecutor had to confer with the criminal division of the department before seeking a warrant. In other words, all these things, you can't just do this unilaterally, right? So, 1, you have to try to get it some other less invasive way, something less offensive to people's rights and or beliefs about what they think are their rights. 2nd, it has to be authorized at a high level. 3rd, the prosecutor has to confer with the criminal division of the Department of Justice before seeking the warrant, before even asking. 4, the team conducting the search had to, quote, employ adequate precautions. It has to be a specially executed kind of search, and presumably with some special training involved as well. You've got to conduct the search to employ adequate precautions to ensure that they weren't improperly viewing privileged communications between Cohen and his clients. And again, there, the emphasis is on privileged communications. Communications that are about the commission of a crime or that are evidence in a crime that in which the attorney, in this case Cohen, is suspected of having participated, wouldn't be privileged communications. But he may have, he doesn't, but he may have, an attorney may have some clients not involved in that particular crime, or some clients who are not even criminal defendants at all, and the communications between that otherwise criminal attorney and that otherwise innocent client, other client, are indeed still privileged. It doesn't destroy the privilege that the attorney had with every one of his clients, the fact that he may have or is suspected of committing a crime in conjunction with some other client. Although, things can spread. If it was, if he's suspected of embezzling from his clients, and we just don't have evidence that he embezzled from this client B yet, but we suspect it may exist, well, that might be searchable as well. But we'll get into that later. So, where were we? Try to get the evidence in some other less invasive way. Get higher-ups authorization to do it. Confer with the criminal division first before even asking for the warrant. When you execute the search, make sure that you aren't improperly viewing privileged communications, such as might exist while you are doing your search. Number 5, the search team would have included a privileged team, that is, lawyers and agents not working the case, which would work to ensure that investigators conducting the search didn't see privileged communications. It's not just that you're supposed to say, well, we'll be careful. It's that, as an added precaution, you bring along other trained lawyers and law enforcement officials who aren't working on that case and therefore have no particular bias, it is presumed, about that case, to observe your search, to make sure that you're not simply saying, oops, I looked at the wrong thing, and then going back and signing an affidavit that says, I didn't do it, or I didn't mean to do it, or whatever. And presumably if you're being observed by neutral and fair observers, they would call you out on that. And then lastly, number 6, the investigators had to develop a review process for the seized material. You can't just seize everything in there and then publish it and then say, oops, we didn't realize that was privileged. There's a lot of safeguards. Before you are allowed to seek the warrant, you have to talk to the criminal division. Once you do seek the warrant, even before you seek the warrant, you have to prove that you tried to get the evidence in some other way, and you got to talk to the criminal division and get their clearance. You got to talk to a higher up at the DOJ and get their clearance. And then when you do the search, you got to make sure you don't meddle in affairs that are none of your business. You've got to bring along trained witnesses who will watch you and make sure that you don't inadvertently or purposefully peek in files that you shouldn't be peeking in. And then finally, the things you do seize that are properly seized need to be sorted out and handled very carefully and not simply released to the public. A lot of safeguards against wrongdoing and witch hunts. We'll be right back. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. For some reason, the mute button didn't want to give it up this morning, but okay. Rolling on now. Let's see. Oh, is there more? I'm going to open up a few tweets flying by just to try and stay current with the news today. I have not, surprisingly enough, haven't heard from Armando this morning, so I assume he's actually working on something important that is keeping him, or he's, to borrow a line, trapped under something heavy and can't get to the phone. I assume this is something that he would want to talk about, and it must be killing him that it's not happening. But certainly, if you free yourself at any point, Armando, you'd certainly be welcome to join in and lend your perspective on all of this. Let's see. I guess what I'll do is pause at this point. I'll share this caution with you. I was about to basically give you this caution anyway, and I don't know who is this. It's a verified personage offering this up. Senior reporter at ProPublica. Okay. Very true. And I did notice a lot of skeptical leftists, I guess we could say, and I say leftists in a loving way, who were reminding us quite properly, the FBI isn't your friend here, by the way, and you shouldn't be cheering just yet because they're riding to the rescue, whatever. That's true, and it's something to be aware of. As Jesse Eisinger puts it, a note of caution on the Michael Cohen news. The FBI screws up a lot. It messed up a raid on Benjamin Way. Case got thrown out. FBI raided David Gannick's hedge fund, which I'm convinced was an abuse. While the procedures appear to have been upheld in the Cohen raid, we don't know what they were authorized to look at and what they took. That will be a legal fight to come, and the FBI doesn't have a pristine track record. Despite their vaunted reputations, the DOJ and FBI don't have as much experience in conducting these raids on white-collar targets as they used to. Now, Mueller and his number two, Weissman, do, but they only referred the case. The Cohen raid was done by the Southern District of New York. White-collar defendants have great resources to fight on any and every issue. Cohen may be an exception since his businesses are getting squeezed and he doesn't have a giant corporation funding his defense. The overall point is Cohen is still innocent until proven guilty, though there is a 5-alarm amount of smoke around him, and the FBI's screw-ups have allowed seemingly guilty people to skirt justice. As a matter of fact, Empty Wheel, Marcy Wheeler has injected herself into this conversation. Her answer, the real issue, it seems, is the underlying stuff. The stormy stuff is pretty clearly campaign finance violation and fraud, with the added benefit of Trump disavowing it on Friday, seemingly limiting attorney-client privilege. But you don't raid Cohen just for a hush payment. And that's probably true. Others agreeing with her response. And I'll agree with both of them. Pardon me for just a second. I spare you that throat clearing. The frog taking up permanent residence with a green card and everything in my throat. It's not easy having a green card, as they say. Now, it's a good warning. I was about to pause at this point in the Washington Post article anyway, having laid out the 6 conditions for the U.S. Attorney's Office to meet in executing this ticklish sort of a warrant. And I was going to say, okay, so what you've just heard is an explanation of those special 6 conditions, not an affidavit from me or anyone else insisting that all 6 conditions have been properly met, although I'm sure such an affidavit exists. I'm not reading that to you. And, of course, such an affidavit could be undermined by evidence introduced later at some point by the defendant saying, well, sure, you say you met all 6 conditions, but here is our argument that you did not. This hasn't been tested. Just to make the point one more time, these 6 conditions that we laid out that sound on paper like there's no way to screw this up because there's protection on top of protection on top of protection. Those are the suggested guidelines. They're very strong suggestions. You want to make sure you stick to them. You may think you stuck to them, and after a certain amount of consideration and legal argument, it may be concluded by some judge somewhere later on that you did pretty good on 1 through 5, but not so good on 6. And then the question, is that enough to destroy the warrant? Is that enough to exclude the evidence? Do you have to do more than not such a good job on one of the 6? Do you have to, is totally screwing up on one of the 6 enough to kill, to kill the warrant and therefore the evidence obtained under the warrant? Is a combination of 2 of them not done all that well enough? Well, there's actual precedent and tests on all of this. I don't actually know the answer offhand. Probably a practitioner in this area would be able to offer you a better view of it. But certainly it should be noted that the defendant or defendants or others, as such as the case may be, since, it may be that Trump's lawyers end up being the one trying to assert some protections or privilege. Could be Cohen, could be Trump, could be some combination of the 2 of them, could be anybody. I don't know at this point who it might turn out to be. But they can absolutely attack the validity of the warrant and the admissibility of any evidence seized by saying some number or combination of these conditions weren't met, either at all or in part, and roll the dice, see how it goes. Or they may just do it just to delay things. You know how this game can go. All right. As a matter of fact, the next paragraph of the piece notes, even with those checks in place, the U.S. attorney wasn't guaranteed a warrant. Search warrants granted to U.S. attorneys are approved by magistrate judges serving the U.S. District Court. The question of what qualifies as privileged communication is complex. You do have to go to law school and spend, well, you could learn it elsewhere, but you do have to spend a considerable amount of time on it because it's nuanced and it's fought about a lot, and there are contradictory approaches taken to it from time to time, and you just have to make the best analogy you can to the kind of case you wish this was and see what a judge thinks. And if you don't like what that judge thinks, see what an appellate court thinks. And if you don't like what that appellate court thinks, see what the Supreme Court thinks. If you think it's that complex an issue, it can go on forever. You can see how there's room for fighting about anything and everything. The question of what qualifies as privileged communications is complex. Not every communication between an attorney and client is included. One type of communication that's excluded: communications between an attorney and a client that might be predicated on committing or covering up a crime. Let's murder somebody and then bury all the evidence and kill all the witnesses. I said that to my attorney, therefore you cannot use it against me. Wrong. Not actually a privileged communication. Doesn't matter if you're the attorney, doesn't matter if you've hired an attorney and that's the one you're speaking to. That doesn't help you. Obviously, you would think it's obvious, but whatever. Anyway, in a phone call with the Post, law professor Robert Weisberg, co-director of the Stanford University Criminal Justice Center, explained where the lines might be drawn. Why the Stanford University Criminal Justice Center, as opposed to, say, Georgetown Law or Harvard Law or anything like that? The answer, very simple. This post was put up April 9th, yesterday, at 5:57 p.m. Philip Bump could not reach an East Coast law professor in time to get that quote at that hour, even though he obviously got the quote well before 5:57. It was late afternoon, and the professors were either teaching class or unavailable, and so he went West Coast on us. But don't worry about it. They have law on the West Coast. You all know that. So I just thought I'd point that one out. So what does Professor Weisberg say with respect to explaining where the lines might be drawn? He says, there is a crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege. The affidavits that went into the warrant application and possibly direct conversations with the judge would have had to give at least prima facie reasons. I love the Latin. Prima? Do they say prima facie? Prima facie? How do Latin speakers say? Prima facie, we say in English. A reason to believe, in other words, something that on its face is reason to believe that the communications sought, even where they were privileged, because they happened, the original assumption that they happened between an attorney and client is that, okay, they are privileged. Now, how do you break through that privilege? Give prima facie reason to believe that that communication, even if it was privileged, gives some indication that Cohen was involved in committing or planning some kind of fraud. Obviously, you won't know until after you see the stuff if the crime fraud exception applied. In other words, you have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. A little bit of that. If you seize the evidence and you're honest and you look at it and you say, you know what, this doesn't give us evidence that Cohen was knowingly or should have known that he was involved in the commission of a crime, then you don't release evidence that was seized and you don't proceed with that particular angle of the prosecution, at least, even if the investigation continues. It's just assumed that the Department of Justice and the FBI will honor their commitment to execution of justice and not leak all that stuff. That may or may not turn out to be the case in the end, but that's what they're supposed to do. And if somebody does leak it, then you find them and you can prosecute them for the leak. You see, there are some safeguards built into this. Essentially, you have to seize the evidence, look at it. If it proves your case, great, go forward. And when it comes time to introduce that evidence in court, the defendant says, objection, attorney-client privilege. And the prosecution says, we've been through this, because by that point at a trial, they would have been through it. Not that they won't make the objection anyway, for all sorts of reasons. But why bother taking you to law school now to teach you those reasons, I say. But at trial, of course, the defendant will say, objection, attorney-client privilege. No, Your Honor, we've been over this. We briefed this. We talked about this a long time ago. This was right from the beginning of the warrant process. Everybody knows that we were going to seize the evidence, look at it, and once we decided that it bore directly on the commission of a crime, we argued that it was not privileged under the attorney-client privilege, and so far everyone and every judge along the way, including you, has agreed with us. Remember that? Yes. Objection overruled. The evidence comes in. Or, I guess, could go the other way, although ordinarily the prosecution, having been shot down, wouldn't, if it's key evidence, have even proceeded to trial, only to they knew going in, only to make it obvious at the crucial moment in the trial that they have no evidence. That trial wouldn't be taking place. So we'll wait and see whether there is one, and then we'll know what people thought of this. Okay, so there we are. That probably only made it more confusing. But obviously, as the professor says, you don't know until after you see the stuff that gets seized, if the crime fraud exception applied. But since you can't prove that the exception applies until you see the actual communications, the U.S. attorney needed to offer evidence to the judge that such communications were likely. The process for obtaining a warrant in a search like this, he added, was similar to the higher burden required to obtain a wiretap. Now, of course, there are some skeptics out there that say, the evidence required to obtain a wiretap, why don't they approve those applications all the time? Well, you may be thinking about the FISA procedures. Perhaps you may not. You may know the difference between the FISA procedures and the ordinary domestic criminal law procedures for obtaining a wiretap, and you still might think they are awfully liberal in handing out these search warrants and wiretaps as well. You might be right. But the point is, you got to go on record and go before a judge. And if judges are used to hearing from cops and the FBI that the people they're targeting are in fact criminals, and they very often do get convicted of those crimes, then you can understand why a judge might say, yeah, as it turns out, most of the applications made to me, at the point they get to me, they've compiled a decent amount of evidence to make me think, sure, it's worth taking a look. Then after you gather evidence, we'll take another look. What's the harm in that? And that's the stage we're at right now. In short, I ruined that. The Cohen search warrant almost certainly included decision-making or approval on the part of the second highest-ranking person at the Justice Department, Rosenstein, a federal judge, and the U.S. attorney or an assistant attorney general. Before it was executed, the team would have needed to check a number of boxes meant to reduce the likelihood of improperly seizing privileged material, and to make the case to a judge that the evidence of criminal behavior would probably be found. We know, too, that this was an exceptional move by the government. It was certainly very interesting. Okay, it says here at the bottom, the article was updated to include Weisberg's comments. That's the West Coast professor. I think we got that little detail right. It was not important, but, a little bit of value added, a little bit of critical reading of what we're talking about here. Okay, let's see. Moving forward, if not moving on, since we're not going to move on likely from this subject, probably for about a week at this point. No, we'll do some other things during the show, I'm sure. Let's take a look at some other stuff about this situation. For instance, I'll share with you from Business Insider this tidbit. It was all over the news eventually, but they were the first ones I saw to point to their previous article about it. About this time last year, April of 2017, Business Insider carried a piece under this headline: Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer will serve, and did serve, as key RNC finance executive. What does this mean? Why am I bringing it up? It's an old article. Maybe you knew it already. Most people had forgotten about this because who cares? Who is the Republican National Committee's National Deputy Finance Chair, or Deputy National Finance Chair, or I don't know, how do they put it? Republican, it says in the article, Deputy National Finance Chairman. Who cares that he is that? Is it sort of more of an honorific? Is it a real thing? Does he really serve day to day with the RNC? I'm not really even sure. But I can tell you this. Keeping in mind that the reason they were raiding his home office and a hotel room, was to search for and seize evidence of bank fraud and campaign finance law violations. That's troubling when you're reminded that, not only are you raiding Trump's personal lawyer's office, home, and hotel room, but you are raiding the office, home, and hotel room of the Republican National Committee's Deputy National Finance Chairman. The finance chairman for the Republican Party, suspected of bank fraud and campaign finance fraud. Two things that you don't want that guy mixed up in. So back in April of 2017, they reported, let's just see if there's any good background info in here. President Trump's longtime attorney Michael Cohen will be Deputy National Finance Chairman of the Republican National Committee. The RNC announced on Monday, that would have been Monday, April, maybe 2nd, 2017. I don't know whether it was, or maybe that was March 31st, but I forget which way the calendar moves on us. Anyway, Cohen served as Executive Vice President, Special Counsel, really, and Special Counsel, maybe, to Trump at the Trump Organization, and sat on multiple boards of other Trump corporations. The RNC said in a press release that Cohen has, quote, been an active spokesperson and an advisor for the president during his interest in seeking office since 2011. I don't know why that means anything, but Cohen, who has been referred to as Trump's pit bull, gained widespread media coverage for his impassioned tirades against journalists and the media for their critical coverage of his boss. Let's see. Oh, good old quote from him. If you do something wrong, to Trump, I'm going to come at you, grab you by the neck, and I'm not going to let you go until I'm finished, he said during an interview with ABC News last year, and he meant he would actually grab your neck. Cohen also lashed out at the Daily Beast after he incorrectly stated that, quote, you cannot rape your spouse, while being interviewed about Ivana, not Ivanka, but Ivana Trump's allegation that Trump raped her when they were married. You remember that? When he realized his statement was not true and that the story would be published, he said, I'm warning you, tread very effing lightly, because what I'm going to do to you is going to be effing disgusting. You understand me? You remember, we read that on the air years ago. The RNC's new roster also features a few other Trump backers, like, I'm only continuing so I can get you this name, Elliot Broidy. Remember that guy that we never did figure out, like, why is he so interesting? He's all over the news. It's going to break big sometime. Well, this is from a year ago, and he hadn't broken big yet. Broidy was national vice chairman of the Trump campaign and vice chairman of the Presidential Inaugural Committee, that slush fund. Broidy will now serve as the RNC's national deputy finance chairman. So I guess they've got a bunch of them. Brian Ballard, who worked on the Trump campaign in Florida and was vice chair of the Presidential Inaugural Committee, will now be a regional vice chairman of the RNC. It goes on to name a couple of other people who are assuming new positions. By the way, by late afternoon, early evening, the RNC had disappeared the name of Michael Cohen from their website, and something. I thought that was very interesting. And so, keep that in mind. A key financial figure for the RNC had his office raided under suspicion of bank fraud and campaign finance law fraud. Wow, that's an awful lot. All right. What else have we got on this front? Let's see. Well, here's the initial word of the raid. The first word I got of it, I guess, was I'm sorry. This is the Associated Press was the first indication I had of a news outlet officially reporting Trump's comment that the raid was an attack on our country. Although it's interesting the way this is phrased, the Associated Press. Breaking, Trump calls probe by special counsel Mueller into election meddling, quote, an attack on our country. And I don't know that that's accurate. They may have revised that. This was, of course, a tweet rather than AP reporting, but maybe they're the same thing. I don't know. I guess it's I think even I would have to agree that I guess I could reread what the president had to say, but I'm pretty sure he was saying that the raid itself was an attack on our country, and not necessarily that the Mueller investigation was, although you could easily convince me that he meant both, or that he had confused the two, which would be easy to do. But even though we've given you a very easy way of separating the two, he's Donald Trump and you're you, and you would understand such a separation, and he would likely not. So that's bad. All right. Let's see. The Washington Post's initial reporting from yesterday on the situation. Trump attorney Cohen is being investigated for possible bank fraud, campaign finance violations. I keep saying that that's the case, but I haven't been able to prove it to date. But now I can by pointing to the reporting of Carol Leonig, Tom Hamburger, and Devlin Barrett, which states right up front, Michael Cohen, longtime attorney of President Trump, is under federal investigation for possible bank fraud, wire fraud, and campaign finance violations, according to 3 people with knowledge of the case. FBI agents on Monday raided Cohen's Manhattan office, home, and hotel room as part of the investigation, seizing records about Cohen's clients and personal finances. Among the records taken were those related to a 2016 payment Cohen made to adult film star Stormy Daniels, who claims to have had a sexual encounter with Trump, according to a 4th person familiar with the investigation. They took Cohen's computer, phone, and personal financial records, including tax returns, as part of the search of his office at Rockefeller Center, that person said. Why not Trump Tower? I am not sure. In a dramatic and broad seizure, maybe they don't like to let mob bosses into Trump Tower these days, which means no one's living here. High vacancy rate. In a dramatic and broad seizure, federal prosecutors collected communications between Cohen and his clients, including those between the lawyer and Trump, according to both people. The raids, part of an investigation referred by Mueller to federal prosecutors in New York, point to escalating legal jeopardy for a long time. Trump, confident, who is deeply intertwined in the president's business and personal matters. I don't know if there's really anything else that we're going to uncover from this reporting. Probably do better to look around and see whether Leonig, Hamburger, Barrett, etc. have anything from this morning. But too many things happening. I'm sure I was reading the news via Twitter this morning and thinking, all right, well, I know that, and that got covered, and it's all in this the older reporting from last night that I've got on tap. Let's, you know what I should do? Let's go over and just see the way Daily Kos is covering things this morning. Trump won't rule out firing Robert Mueller. Time for Congress to rule it out for him is the title, much shared, I think, of Laura Clausen's piece from yesterday, now running this morning, at the moment at the top of the front page over at Daily Kos. And that is an issue. And I guess I'll note for the record that one of your favorite podcasters out there from our Netroots radio family, Arliss Bunny, working hard behind the scenes to try to arrange on an emergency basis for you Netroots radio /KITM /podcasting fans a live broadcast should such a firing ever take place, no matter when, no matter what time, no matter who's on the air. Our plan, if it comes together, is to just bring up a new live stream, whether it's during the Kagro in the Morning program or otherwise, and gather up any of the willing, experienced radio and podcasting hands that we have, plus our favorite guests, plus pretty much anybody else that we can convince to come on over from the editorial side, perhaps over at Daily Kos, to have a live streaming radio outlet for breaking developments analysis. In case you need to know what analysis is, see earlier in the show. We'll adopt the Washington Post definition of it for the time being. But just to hear it described, discussed, and analyzed in real time by some of your favorites will get you details as we set them in stone about exactly where you can turn to listen in on that. But Netroots Radio will be the place. So if you are listening to the live stream, or if you're listening to the podcast and you've ever considered listening to the live stream, or if that is the first time you ever considered, or will be the first time you've ever considered listening live, you can find the links, of course, in our morning posts and in our roundups and everything. But every morning on the front page of Daily Kos, plus over at the Daily Kos Radio blog group, you can find the links to the live stream, which we use every morning and post for you every morning. And you can patch in that way and listen to what's going on over at Daily Kos, or rather over at Netroots Radio. So I don't know how long that would last. We might do it all day long. We might bring in Armando. We might bring in Greg. We'll certainly be featuring the other podcasters of Netroots Radio, possibly including Justice himself, possibly including Drift Class and Blue Gal, possibly including Will McLeod along with Arliss Bunny. And let's see, who else? Travis and Rachel from Irreverent Testimony. Am I missing people? Probably. I'll round it up a little bit better after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a little bit of behind-the-scenes work. Armando has surfaced at last, reminding me of, yet more nuance and detail that could be included in the question of what is privileged as between, between attorneys and clients. Boy, really just having a hard time keeping everything clear here. Okay. Available to join around 10:15 if we like. Sure, why not? We can always head back in that direction. His comment behind the scenes, though, the question of what's privileged as between attorneys and clients, even more complex with someone like Cohen, who seems to act as a business agent, not a litigation attorney or a traditional role. I mean, business agent is not outside the purview of an attorney, and very often people will have their attorneys act as their business agents. That's true, but yeah, that's true. He does. It will confuse things because he has such a wide scope and wide-ranging relationship with Trump, and it'll cut both ways from time to time. So I guess we could say on the cautionary side, there may be some things that a judge would be favorably inclined to rule Trump's way on because of the weird relationship that they have. But there's also a lot of ways to argue in the other direction, depending on which judge you draw and how cautious they want to be and how cautious the prosecutors want to be in getting it right versus is this some sort of essential detail that really has to be fought about tooth and nail. It'll be interesting to see how some of those questions come down. It's impossible to predict exactly what those questions are going to be at this stage for a number of reasons, not the least of which is either one of these people, Donald Trump or Michael Cohen, can turn on a dime in the way they describe the scope and nature of that relationship. Witness, I mean, this is how we got here, I guess, essentially. That's what makes this so confusing and so infuriating in so many ways. I don't know exactly what prompted Mueller to say that he thought it was absolutely necessary to get at this information about Stormy Daniels or the Stormy Daniels affair. Though it is certainly the case that we've seen this turning on a dime create these sorts of problems. I don't know still, although the problems were interesting, why it rises to the level that it would catch Mueller's interest, but maybe it's just sort of ancillary. I can see that there's a legal problem here. It's not necessarily my issue, but I'm the one with my eye on these guys, and obviously I see it, and if I refer it to the Department of Justice, something will possibly get done about it, whereas if Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington makes the observation, it's not necessarily the case that there would be an investigation ensuing at this level. So I'll take it upon myself to do that, and that's within my purview. But like I said, the turning on a dime. The president, I negotiated this whole thing myself on behalf of the president. Oh, really? Well, then he should know something about. Oh, well, he doesn't know anything about it because I did it without his knowledge. Oh, so it's without his knowledge. So therefore, there's really no contract here. And if there's no contract here, then the information you have about it probably doesn't fall under attorney-client privilege because, one, he didn't know anything about it, and two, you haven't performed any legal services here with respect to the Stormy Daniels affair because that's not a contract that you've made. Or if it is a contract, it's a contract between Stormy Daniels and an LLC you formed, nothing that has anything to do with Donald Trump. And certainly, if he doesn't know about what's going on, it's unlikely that he could assert any particular privilege in it. And that's not even necessarily the case all across the board. You can see how this could become very complicated very quickly. And you can see how the complexity of it arises from the inability or the refusal of both Donald Trump and Michael Cohen and almost everybody related to their circle, their refusal to allow themselves to be nailed down to one statement of the truth of what happened here. And that makes them difficult to nail down and therefore perhaps difficult to prosecute, but it also opens up all sorts of possibilities for rifling their papers, which will eventually yield the evidence that you need to nail them down as slippery and slick as they think they're being in denying the positions they took 5 minutes previously. The documents will nail it down beyond a reasonable doubt in court, and you can now get to those documents because they keep doing dumb stuff. Like I said, they are only interested in ducking the question immediately before them, and they don't think about the repercussions their answers, disingenuous though they may be, have on answers previously given. And they may have not only the effect of making them look like hypocrites, liars, or double dealers, or what have you, but they may have legal consequences like destroying the presumption of privilege on something that's terribly important as evidence. And I don't think Michael Cohen is really capable of thinking that stuff through sometimes. Or if he is, he gets caught up in the moment. He wants to win the debate at hand, even if that's just one question at a time. And that's not good lawyering. You need to be a little more strategic than that. Here's a great way to finally use the chess versus checkers analogy, right? You have to be able to think it all the way through and realize that what you've said previously is going to bear on what you say subsequently. Armando has called, but then he quickly dropped the call here, and I'm not certain whether that was a computer issue or whether he got a client call that came in afterwards. But give it another shot if you're ready, Armando. If not, we'll certainly hang out and wait for you. Scrolling down the page at Daily Kos Radio, at Daily Kos Non-Radio, I find Mark Sumner's piece was a second up on the scroll here. Raid on Trump's personal attorney suggests criminal activity on the part of Cohen and possibly Trump. Let's take a look at his encapsulation of things. On Monday, FBI agents, as you know, conducted the raids on all of those various locations. The raids were based on a referral by Mueller, a warrant issued by U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman, and carried out by the New York office of the FBI. Remember, of course, the New York office of the FBI, once described as Trump land, and U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jeffrey Berman, the appointee replacing the fired Preet Bharara. So, that's ironic. And I don't know whether, I don't know how much stock you want to necessarily put in the fact that it was those guys who approved and carried out the raid, but it's at least an opportunity to say if it's a witch hunt, it's your own guys who are approving it, and that's funny and ironic all by itself. All right, Armando is here, so I'm sure you've been interested in chiming in on this. I know you were active on it last night, and maybe there's something new you want to add to your line of reasoning. Yeah,
I listened to about half of what you said.
Me too.
I think the genesis of it is pretty interesting. I think that I don't know if you spent much time in how is it that Cohen would somehow become a target of all this?
A little bit. I mean, we've all always suspected that he was. I mean, that those guys, as between them, probably believed that, hey, if you ever commit a crime, just give me the evidence and I'll file it, and therefore attorney-client privilege, and you'll be safe forever. And he's probably got evidence of all kinds of wrongdoing, some of which they are aware of, and some of which they think isn't wrongdoing. But I was curious about how anybody came to view the Stormy Daniels deal as important enough to raid his office for. But I suspect there's more to that.
Yeah, I think that's actually there's a lot to learn from the Stormy Daniels situation, and I think in some respects it's worth reviewing. Now, first, I think you probably noted the search warrant itself said that it was searching for evidence of campaign finance violations.
Yes.
All right. And of course, that is a theory that you and I have discussed before. Yeah. The John Edwards precedent that this was 12 days before the election. It was a payoff to keep quiet a story that would have damaged Donald Trump's candidacy just before the election. It was $130,000. Well above the maximum limit. It was not disclosed to the FEC, which is another violation. And the question of willfulness seems pretty clear. It was a willful attempt to violate the campaign finance laws. I actually do think that's fairly slam dunk for Cohen. The question was always, what was Donald Trump's involvement in that?
Yeah.
And Cohen says that Donald Trump didn't know anything. That he did it himself. That he took a second mortgage at a bank or something like that, which was nuts. And he created his LLC, Essentials Something LLC, Delaware.
Yes.
And he dummied up this non-disclosure agreement, and he purported to act for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So the question, I think, is this in terms of the lesson. You've got the straightforward campaign finance issue, but then there's another. Is this an illustrative manner in which Michael Cohen acted for Donald Trump? That is, okay, this was a payoff hush money. And there is a question whether he paid hush money to other women, which seems almost certainly true. And did he do it like this, which is another issue? And when did he do it? Did he do others in 2016? Steve Bannon was quoted as saying that hundreds of women were bottled up by the campaign. I don't know if you remember that quote.
I don't
Michael
exactly,
Wolff
but
Fire and Fury.
That seems so. Well, hundreds. I wonder.
He said hundreds.
Yeah,
I
mean,
didn't say
he
it.
appears to have said it.
Steve Bannon's words.
Yeah, and we can all trust Steve Bannon's words, but he said it. Okay.
Right. So then there's the third thing. The Cohen, before Trump became a politician, Trump would do, these shady deals, money laundering deals, mostly, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. What was Michael Cohen doing with regard to that? And was he forming up dummy LLCs to make payments on behalf of Donald Trump that Donald Trump could deny?
Yeah.
So there goes to that question of whether nefarious activities of the Trump organization were carried out by Michael Cohen, holding himself out as an attorney, but in fact merely being a business agent, an instrument of a business purpose. A lawyer does specific things. A lawyer advises legally, right?
Yeah.
So in a transaction, a lawyer might draft the documents. He might revise the documents. He might advise his client what the documents entail as a legal matter, et cetera. Now, there are negotiating lawyers, and you see this a lot in the entertainment business, and maybe that's what Michael Cohen was intended to be. And generally speaking, these things don't get litigated, so no one really tests whether the communications for that type of person are privileged, because a communication given to an attorney,
tough day today.
Sorry, is for the purposes of rendering legal advice or seeking legal advice. Now, the question of expectation is important here, and to the degree that Donald Trump had a reasonable expectation
of
that his communications were privileged, he may have an argument. The question, of course, there, the all-important word is reasonable. What's the reasonable expectation? Is it reasonable for you to expect that your attorney can go pay off an assassin for you, and that would be privileged? No, the answer is that's not privileged. And of course, the way to go it the other way is through the crime fraud exception, which may just be run-of-the-mill crime fraud exception arguments that are being employed here by the Southern District of New York. By the way, we talked about Mueller, and I don't know if you talked about Mueller versus the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
Yes, a little bit. This was purposefully kicked up to New York, covering a lot of bases here, but plain fact of it is that the raid, the warrant was sought and granted, and raid conducted by people unconnected to the Mueller investigation, except insofar as they all work for the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I mean, as the story unfolded, as reported, and Mueller isn't talking, the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney isn't talking, and DOJ isn't talking. Of course, the only person who's actually talking is Donald Trump. But
yes,
we can talk about that in a second. But to take first things first, as the story is told, and you probably went through this, Mueller received some type of information that he thought merited inquiry regarding Michael Cohen.
Yeah, and it was probably, like you pointed out, probably on the campaign finance front. If all the denials of Trump's knowledge are to be taken at face value, and now the president himself says, I had nothing to do with it, I don't know what happened, then all you're left with is a guy who said, I donated $130,000 to the campaign of Donald Trump. Oh, well, that looks like a campaign finance violation, and that guy is the deputy national finance chair for the Republican National Committee. That sounds like a problem. Campaign finance law violations, arguably close to, if not entirely within the purview of my mandate here, though this one doesn't appear to have a direct connection to Russia. So let's say, out of an abundance of caution, someone should look into this, because I'm special counsel. I see a crime. It's related to the election, but it's not really my thing. Why don't we have the New York folks take care of this one?
Let me throw in my particular conspiracy theory.
All right.
And it starts with a man named Felix Sater.
I know that guy.
S-A-T-E-R. Felix Sater has been an informant, apparently, for the Department of Justice for many years.
Yes.
He was a mobster for the Russians and
Yes.
got involved in stock fraud and got flipped. And his entire sentencing report has been sealed.
Yeah.
After that, he got involved in a new swindle, apparently, and alleged by some that he's been protected in his swindles by the Department of Justice.
Yes.
The Department of Justice where? The Department of Justice in New York.
Yes.
Now, it comes out of the Eastern District of New York, but they obviously work together a fair amount. And the question of whether Sater was the source of information after being interviewed by Mueller. Obviously, when I say Mueller, I mean his team. I don't imagine Mueller specifically did the interview. And led to some information that goes beyond the Stormy Daniels situation, that talks about things Michael Cohen did with Felix Sater in terms of financing and deals and things like that.
And we did read somewhere along the line that they are actually like childhood friends. They've known each other and run in the same circles for a long time.
That's what we understood, and we know that Sater and Cohen were pursuing a Russia project in 2016.
Yeah.
Now, was Cohen acting for himself or for Trump? I've never heard that story been explained in a straightforward way. Again, we hadn't focused on it because there's so many other things that happen every day that sometimes we lose these threads.
On what front? On the Stormy Daniels front or on the Moscow building front?
On everything. There's always something going on, and we forget about, well, wait a second, let's pull this thread. Michael Cohen was trying to get a Russia deal done in 2016.
Yeah.
That's story number 72 of the day, right?
Yeah.
We don't think about it. But to the degree that that Sater has provided information that has led to this focus on Cohen and this search warrant being executed. I think it actually leads to a situation that I frankly thought was hiding in plain sight, which is that Donald Trump was running a money laundering operation and Michael Cohen was in the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, I always thought so, but okay. But how do we get there from Stormy Daniels? I think we're
I don't know.
stuck.
I think Stormy Daniels is the campaign finance piece, but there's a bank fraud piece.
Yeah, I mean that's. Yes, that's right. As wasn't there? Where did I read this? But the claim from Cohen that he acted alone in doing this. Right, he had to come up with $130,000 somewhere. Somebody said, "Where'd you get the money?" It wasn't just lying around, I guess, in coffee cans, which is what he should have said. I have it buried in my backyard, but he didn't. Yeah, he had to get a loan of some kind or take out a mortgage, as you said. Okay, what bank? XYZ Bank. All right, cool. Maybe let's find out. Does XYZ Bank know why they gave the loan? Because ordinarily, why do you need $130,000? Pay a porn star. Huh. That's weird. I don't think we want to do that one. Can I invest in the building.
Can I just point one thing out that's weird to me?
Yeah. No. Yes.
Look, I mean, Michael Cohen is a higher up in the Trump organization. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to sound like a one percenter, but you're telling me he didn't have $130,000 in the bank?
I am not. He says that.
That's kind of weird, isn't it?
Not in one account, FDIC. So, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you would think that to do the things that you do on behalf of Donald Trump. Doesn't everybody think that the people who do this garbage do it because they're selling out? Well, surely you're selling for more than $100,000, yes? Over how many years? I would think that Michael Cohen is a diehard Trump loyalist because Donald Trump has made him an extraordinarily rich man. He's not particularly
But
powerful.
if he doesn't have
He's just rich.
$130,000 in
Yeah.
the bank, how rich did he actually
Right.
make him?
Well, how rich is Donald Trump? I guess that question comes up again. I don't know. I don't know why that's. And I guess it's because they both live the same way. They are in command of a number of accounts from which they can draw or appear to draw or fake people out about the ability to draw large amounts of cash. But when it comes to, showing up with a briefcase, they need to open an ATM somewhere and get at this stuff. And they're maybe they're rich on paper. I don't know. But
David, I believe the premise here, and I think it's based on reporting, is that he took out a mortgage to get the money.
Yeah, that's hard to believe. Unless, of course, it was a fraudulent mortgage of some kind, which is how you get.
Well, it almost certainly, when you do purposes of the loan, you say business or investment or
so there's
home
the fraud.
Improvement. You don't say hush money for porn stars,
Right.
generally speaking.
I do, but it's rare.
So the whole thing doesn't add up, and there's something so weird about it all. And I just feel like Sater may have unlocked some doors that gave them enough information that they felt that they could execute the search warrant, and clearly a federal magistrate judge in Manhattan agreed.
Yeah. Yep. So there's not too much.
And Rod Rosenstein agreed, and the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York agreed.
Yeah.
And the criminal division of the FBI had agreed. I mean, the conspiracy is getting wide. The witch hunt really is encompassing a whole bunch of people now.
Yes, that's true. It's a very strange thing, and it may turn out that this could have been avoided. I wouldn't doubt that. I don't know. It's hard to imagine that he couldn't find $130,000 quietly, but he says he couldn't. Now, why did he say he couldn't? I don't know whether he thought that makes it look like he's an ordinary guy just working hard for a president he loves or what. But like I said, it sounds like he didn't really think through the answer. He thought he was going to sound like an average Joe. I love this guy so much, and I trust him so much, I took out a second mortgage. Just like you would have to, Mr. and Mrs. America, if you needed $130,000. Meanwhile, 98%
to pay
of
off
America
hush money
can't.
to a porn star for your friends.
Just like you would, just like Grandpa used to do. But
again,
now
Cohen is an inveterate liar. And,
well, yes,
this whole Prague story. Remember the Prague story? We still don't
Yes.
know what the heck is going on with that.
I was joking yesterday.
Remember on the Stormy Daniels story itself, he denied there was ever a payment. He said it's a completely made-up story, that didn't happen, yada, yada. I don't mean just about the affair. At first, he started blanket, whatever.
Yeah.
Then he said, it's absolutely false he had an affair, when everyone was asking, what about the payoff?
Yeah.
And then finally he came clean on it at some point, and I forget why, but he did say, I did it.
Yeah.
And then we found out about this Essentials LLC, and I forget how we found out about it, except, he filed. No, he did not. He got sued. No, he filed the arbitration, I guess, and got that weird order from the arbitration company.
Yeah. Again, so many moving parts that each one, had they done any one of them differently, might have landed them on, oh my God, I have to make a completely different assertion. Again, all along the way, he seeks to escape one question at a time, and then ends up painting himself into a corner where, fine, I had $130,000. Yes, I had it under my mattress, or yes, I had it in the bank, and I could have done it, but I did it this way because I was trying to wiggle out of this question and make sure that person didn't find out that I was moving that much money, and I didn't tip off that person, but it tipped off a different person, and now I'm screwed.
Okay, I know we're going on the break in 2 minutes, but can I note something? Sir Maggie Haberman says,
all right,
in a tweet yesterday that Trump and Cohen are sure Mueller's behind all this. Because, even though it came out of the Southern District of New York, they believe he's the one who orchestrated it.
Okay.
And it just got me to thinking about the essential flaw in Maggie Haberman. as a reporter in the Trump era.
Just generally.
Trump lies first about literally everything.
Yes.
So when Trump says he believes or thinks or says, the first thing you should say to yourself, but that's probably a lie, so what's the truth? Maggie Haberman never does that. And I think it's important that that convention be explored a little bit, in this case in particular, and then maybe I could talk about that on the other side.
Yeah. All right. Well, and break now, so. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando still with us, discussing, of course, very complex and perplexing, I guess you could say, case of, well, everything that Donald Trump does. And in particular, of course, the raid yesterday. When we left off, just before the break, you were saying, and I think a lot of people share this sentiment, that Maggie Haberman seems either unwilling or incapable, perhaps, of accepting the fact that Donald Trump lies in the first instance about anything that you ask him about. As we've said on the show, right? My favorite story about him, the person who says he'd lie to you about what time it is just for the practice. Although I will say this, I don't know exactly as a journalist, what's supposed to be the straight news reporter who's supposed to tell you what happened on the ground today and who said what. What do you do about the fact that this person you're covering is an inveterate liar, and is it really should somebody else, should the editor put a note at the top of your pieces that say this piece leans extensively on quotes from Donald Trump and he's a liar, but here's what he said? I don't know. Is it?
I think you got to put in Trump, whose veracity has been incredibly suspect from the beginning of his candidacy and his presidency. As fact checkers prove that he tells 50 lies a day. I mean, something like that has to be noted on everything he says at this point.
Yes.
David, here's a story that nobody's talking about today.
Oh, all right.
Let me tell you a story. So just to give you an illustration. Sarah Sanders said the president feels that millions of people voted illegally in the last election.
Yeah, he feels that. Okay.
He feels that. What does that even mean?
It means...
And they couldn't prove it because people withheld the evidence. I guess the attorney-client privilege held in those cases. The point is, there's nothing they say that's true. Nothing.
Yeah, not intentionally.
This isn't normal politics lying where, hey, look, tax cuts are going to be good and raise everybody. I'm not talking that kind of lie. I mean the sun rises in the east lie. They'll say, nope, it doesn't. It rises in the west. I know. Mr. Trump feels the sun rises in the west.
Yes.
And they're shameless about it. You know why they're shameless about it? Because Maggie Haberman pretends to believe them.
Well, I think...
I'm using her as an example. It's not just Maggie Haberman.
Well, okay.
Pretend to believe them. It's time to put that convention aside.
I agree that it would be a good idea. I guess my thing, I don't know if it's necessarily a defense of Maggie Haberman. I don't mean it to be because I don't get paid enough to do that, or at all for that purpose. But yeah, what do you do? I guess is the question. I mean, you suggested, and I think it's right to say if I'm writing these things, I say Trump, who is an inveterate liar and has been documented to tell upwards of 50 lies a day on average. See Daniel Dale, who actually keeps count of these things, daily and has the linked receipts for it, says XYZ. P.S. His spokesperson, who, also a pretty pathetic liar in her own right, couldn't even carry water for this one by saying the president feels it. And that's supposed to mean you can't call me a liar and you can't call him a liar. You can just say he's a dummy and I work for a dummy. That's the best you can say. That's why we use the feels formulation. But what do you do? Like, suppose the president does come and say, thanks for coming to my this would be his first press conference as president of the United States. I just wanted to let you know that the sun rises in the west. This is not a feeling. I am telling you that's the truth. Like, can you impeach him for that? I guess no. What do we do? Say, and it's you're still not normal political lying, and it's maybe evidence of the 25th Amendment should be invoked, but
right.
What do you do?
It sounds like the 25th Amendment is built for that. No?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but then...
But, he picks his own cabinet, and look at them. They're a bunch of crazy liars, too.
Right, and then he'll have a roundtable session where he says, I want everybody, before I give you your lunch, you have to say why I'm smart about the sun rising in the west thing.
And they all agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's a tough nut to crack, but look, I do think, and you probably started with this. We are inexorably headed towards Trump firing Rosenstein, Mueller, and whoever he has to in this investigation.
Yes,
there's no escaping that now. It's not it's conjecture, but it's very informed conjecture because there's one way he's going to save himself, and it's that.
Yeah, I did think, as I was asked about this yesterday, and when do you think it'll happen? People were asking, take a bet or, make a prediction about when. And I wanted to take the other side of it and say, I have a feeling that Donald Trump, because he's a weirdo, a wacko, a contrarian, an idiot, a rogue agent, I don't know what, he might make Michael Cohen sweat a little bit just because he seems to like to do that. That's sometimes part of his chaos thing. Like if Cohen calls him and says, you got to fire Mueller today or I'm dead. Trump is the kind of guy who'll say, how dead are you? And I'll wait a week just to do it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see the different ideas that have been floated from the Fox crazies.
Oh, okay, yes.
DeGeneva says and Tensing say the Congress should impeach Sessions and Rosenstein and Christopher Wray for some reason.
Oh, sure. Why not?
To impeach them.
Yeah.
It's interesting they chose impeachment as opposed to Trump should fire them because Trump can fire them.
Yeah.
Of course. They serve at his pleasure. These are political appointees, though we have traditionally treated them as nonpartisan and generally something beyond the president doesn't like you. But this is Trump world, and, if you want to be technical about it, he has the power to do it. So why does DeGeneva say Congress should impeach them?
So that there's no stain on Trump for getting rid of him. At this point,
exactly. But they're not. Yeah. Congress isn't going to do that, though. So what's the purpose? What's the purpose of that? Is it to have Trump say they should impeach them as opposed to firing them himself? What do you think? Or is he just a doddering old fool and an idiot who's always been DeGeneva? I believe has always been a doddering old fool.
There's an argument for both.
Who just doesn't know what he's saying.
I mean, it could be that. It could be. You never know with these guys. We keep saying, is Trump crazy like a fox, or is he just crazy? It might just be, oh my God, this is so bad. We should impeach the president. And then the president's defenders say, oh yeah, we should impeach you. What? Is it an argument? No. Well, is he strategizing and does he want to keep Trump's fingerprints off of it? No, it's just, I'm rubber and you're glued, you. Yes. That's all he did. You can impeach those.
Geraldo had his own kind of interesting little suggestion to the president because he doesn't he thinks firing Mueller will be a firestorm and that would bring Trump down. Apparently, I'm not so sure, but Geraldo may think so. So he's saying fire Sessions, fire Rosenstein, bring in whoever. I've heard Kelly Ayot's name today for some reason. I don't know if it was you.
No.
Somebody mentioned Kelly Ayot.
I think it was Kelly
and I'm
Ayot.
like, what? Kelly Ayot? Well, how did you get into this? But the idea, and then, circumscribe and tighten Mueller's jurisdiction. Sort of strangle him procedurally. But don't fire Mueller. Which, by the way, of all the suggestions, that one sort of makes the most sense.
Firing Mueller? Or
No, not firing Mueller. Just really firing everybody who supervises him and really keeping a tight noose on him. And when he recommends indictments, you say, nope, we're not doing that. Sorry, Bob. What do you mean? Nope.
Yeah. That's
so
the best
then I'll report it to Congress. Do what the hell you want, Bob. No indictment. Sorry. Now what? So there's no indictment, and there's a storm, and it's a he said, she said, and it's crossfire. And Byron York says that Republicans are firmly behind not indicting, and it becomes a big nothing, right? So I actually think of all the ideas, Geraldo sort of stumbled under the best one.
You're right. I think that's probably true, because then it would land on, well, we knew going into this that it was highly questionable whether a sitting president could be indicted. That's how it would fall out, But no, it wasn't. Going into this, we said that there was actually very little doubt about we'll have to leave it there.
Exactly.
And then that's it. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think that would be the easiest way to finish this out.
Would say you can't indict, and this is a witch hunt, and then Jeff Toobin says, no, it isn't. And we're back in the same nonsense.
Yes.
Whereas, and I think Geraldo's instinct is right. If he fires Mueller, that penetrates further than anything else. He fired the guy who's investigating him directly.
Yeah.
Right. And, just looks at that point, there's no more fig leaf. There's no more a way to do this other than to say, because it's Nixon firing Cox, and the firestorm that caused, and of course it led to impeachment and removal. So I do think that they're probably strategizing that. And Trump is, I think, truly panicked. I mean, if you saw his appearance yesterday, I think unhinged, of course, is sort of his default mode. But I saw such panic. I thought it was amazing. He looked positively frightened in my mind.
Yeah, I did hear a lot of people saying that he was doing his characteristic arms crossed thing, but that was the description of everybody in the room. Everybody looked a little rattled and frightened. I didn't actually see it. I saw a lot of screen caps of it, but not much more. But I can believe
it'd be worth your time just to think. It's about 3 minutes or so. You might want to see it.
I think I do.
It was a Trump I had not seen in a while.
Okay.
I'll put it that way.
It
was sort of the Trump that right after the Access Hollywood tape, who was forced to make a statement.
Yes.
That kind of Trump.
The last time Ivanka had anything happen for all of her influence. Yes. Let me, I was going to say, well, let's see. First of all, there's been a couple of other comments, quick comments along the way. One, Ron Mack Sr. saying Trump will fire near the date of the Comey book release. That's a thought. I mean, that would probably be one of the worst strategic things to do. So, yeah, that might happen. Michael Musson making this point, wasn't the mortgage, that is the mortgage that Michael Cohen says he took out for the Stormy Daniels payment, wasn't the mortgage just designed to avoid the extra bank reporting that would make the Stormy Daniels affair public, like what happened to Hastert? Like, in other words, paying somebody or transferring more than X amount, and I assume it's somewhere in the $100,000 range. Transferring $130,000 to her might create a problem all by itself. We've lost our Armando connection, but you're welcome to try and reestablish it at any time. And I think that's a good observation, worth thinking about. Probably explains something, but once again, he was looking to wiggle out of the immediate question: how can I avoid the reporting And the answer is I could get a hold of the money in a different way, and it ends up not helping, but in fact building a case for some other way of ending up accessing the information. We now find out the information in a different way through a search warrant instead of through bank reporting. It's entirely possible that, at one particular point in time, he thought that there was less exposure by accessing the money this way rather than the other way, and then it turned out to backfire on him because he's kind of a dummy and doesn't think ahead, or whatever. Or maybe news breaks from an angle that was unexpected and comes in. And the thing about Trump, with all of his interconnected intrigues, you never know when something else will come spinning into the wrong orbit and collide with something that you thought you set up very well, but you really are a dummy and you didn't. Or your client is a dummy and makes it impossible. I'm not certain which one is which. Maybe it's both. So all of that is possible. Also, by the way, comment on your observation that DeGeneva and Tensing saying, we think you should impeach everybody. That is, everybody that's investigating Trump and authorizing the investigation rather than impeaching Trump. Interesting observation, just having followed up yesterday and having gotten some interesting pushback from one of our listeners to the idea that Greg was putting forward about, probably all of the political consultants will be advising Democrats, don't talk about impeachment. Meanwhile, over on the right, they can't stop talking about impeachment. Not only the threat, they say that if you elect Democrats, they'll impeach Donald Trump, but they're keeping it. Are they trying to keep the I word in the news in order to panic their base, even if they're just actually saying it about other people? Or are they just throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks, or a little bit of both? But interestingly, for some reason, some person on quote unquote the left publishes something somewhere, and probably not a very important place, saying something impeachment. And
Tom
pretty soon,
Steyer is the guy who spent the most money on it.
Oh, well, yes. But I'm just saying, is that some guy will say, or some person somewhere will say something impeachment, and 16 public intellectuals of the center will write articles about how it's suicide for the Democrats, to talk impeachment. One guy who maybe sort of says he's independent.
Put David Axelrod where he belongs, which is the center pundit world. He is not really a Democratic operative or pundit anymore.
Well,
go
yes.
ahead.
Okay, I'll agree with that. And so immediately that becomes the position. You got to watch out. Everybody be careful. Now, so there will be no articles that say the right has to be careful not to discuss this or not to
They never have to be careful.
Right, sure. Why?
We
Don't
just accept their
energize
lunacy. It's like Trump.
Right.
Don't
energize the left base to say, well, we got to maintain our numbers or even improve things in the House and the Senate so that they don't impeach Wray and Mueller and Rosenstein.
I actually have a thought on that. I think Axelrod has to basically reformulate himself. I think he will. I think he will be someone who's going to say, but if he fires Mueller or interferes with Mueller's investigation, then all bets are off. I think that is a defensible position.
Yeah.
I think the media will buy into it. They'll think it's a reasonable thing to say. So, look, we won't talk impeachment, but if he fires Mueller or if he impedes Mueller, all bets are off. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be a position that people can live with.
Well, it's out
across
there.
the spectrum. Even Joe Manchin,
I hope so.
can live with that.
Yeah, I hope so. It doesn't mean that it gets done either, which I guess also relates back to why will there also be no articles about DeGeneva and Tensing involved in hopeless dreaming. There's no way they'll ever get to the numbers to impeach and remove those people from office. It's beyond a pipe dream, even with a majority in the Senate, which they may lose, but you don't have the votes. And that was always the dismissal of impeachment discussion ever.
You never have the votes till you have the votes.
Right.
That's just the reality.
Yeah, there's just been there hasn't been a Senate that was 2/3 in one party's hand since probably, I don't know, the New Deal.
But I do think Mueller being not interfered with or fired is going to be a line you have to stand there. It's just that simple. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? All right. Well, if he cancels the election, then I'll impeach him. I mean,
yes. That'll be my that's it. I'm out. If he says he's the reincarnation of Hitler, I'm finished. Then I'm probably going to vote against him in the election. I mean.
No, but when he cancels the election, well, that's problematic if he cancels.
I don't
the
know.
election.
Joe Lieberman says.
Yeah, no labels is saying. Good
right.
God.
Look, I don't know that he's not going to make the trains run on time. I like trains.
But for whatever reason, I think the psyche of the media, the mainstream media, has absorbed the idea that firing Mueller is that kind of event that will justify people saying that's an impeachable offense.
Yes, well, I hope so.
I think there's a consensus there. So I believe that you're in fairly safe ground as a Democrat, mainstream Democrat. As I said, I don't see why Joe Manchin would have a problem with that position. I pick Manchin as someone who's running for re-election in a Trump state, who's probably the most conservative Democrat in the entire Senate. And if I think he can, absorb it without any real qualms, it seems to me that should encompass then everybody. Indeed, if you're in a primary, in a primary race in a House district that's competitive, I think you're going to have to.
Yes,
I think if you don't, you're going to lose.
Well, at that point, you would think so. All right. By the way, let's see. New development, still developing development. Top Trump security advisor Tom Bossert resigning. A top Homeland Security aide, Tom Bossert.
Good. He made the most moronic statement yesterday.
What was that?
And, he used to have his defenders, and I was like, but everything he says is stupid. And he said yesterday that not one voter in the country was impacted by the Russian interference. Not one.
Oh, well, okay then.
Not a single one, David.
Right.
Not that it had didn't have a material impact, or that the voting tabulations weren't changed. Not a single voter was influenced by what the Russians did.
Right.
Not
and
one.
He asked them all, so he knows that it's true, just like Lindsey Graham knows that no one illegally immigrates from Canada because he once went to New Hampshire and he didn't see any.
He said it was a hoax. The whole Russia thing was a big hoax for an excuse to explain how they lost and to undermine the Trump
That's
presidency.
not the guy you'd think would be resigning at this point.
Well, he should be resigning because you're not being a government official. You're being a political operative, and go work for the RNC. In fact,
maybe that's what he's doing.
Michael Cohen as deputy finance chair for the RNC.
Yes, you could do that, and maybe that's what it doesn't say where he's going. And I suppose if he's resigning, it could be to move over to the political side. And
it's Republican welfare in the Republican welfare circuit. Sinclair commentator.
Okay. This news also, breaking news. I guess. The Obamas will not be attending the royal wedding. That's very generous of them. They don't want to embarrass the Trumps, I guess. I don't know what the reason is.
Already happened,
but who cares? And
I go further. If that's why he didn't go, that's unacceptable, really. I believe they have a true friendship with Harry and Meghan Markle.
Maybe.
Why snub them? Because Trump's an idiot.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's not right.
I doubt
if he couldn't go. He couldn't go. I get that. Or maybe they said, "Listen, we're going to invite you, but maybe it's better if you don't go." So, but I want to invite you. I want to make the point that I'm not caving.
Yes.
So just turn us down.
Yes.
Maybe something like that. And most likely that is the situation.
Yeah. Well, there it is.
Which means the Clintons probably aren't going to go either.
Maybe. I don't know who actually, it's not clear that it was an Obama decision here. Let's see. They won't be among the guests at the upcoming wedding. The ex-commander-in-chief and first lady will not be attending. Quote, will not be attending the royal nuptials, et cetera, but the couple looks forward to seeing each other soon. It has been decided that an official list of political leaders, both UK and international, is not required for Prince Harry and Ms. Markle's wedding, a Kensington Palace spokesman told the Daily Mail. So it sounds like a Kensington Palace decision. They decide, well, for whatever reason, it's just so ticklish and weird that maybe it's best if we don't have international delegations.
You know what? I think that's stupid, but okay. It's their wedding.
It's your country.
Whatever they want to do.
You can't tell them what to do. So, okay.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and
actually
they are
somewhat
public
interesting.
dole. You know, they are basically on the public dole. They're public servants in that their existence is basically paid for by the British government. So, in that sense, you sort of give away some freedom. But I think that's still a mistake. I mean, so what? Trump gets upset about that. Who cares?
No, I don't know what to say. But headaches they don't need. And okay, in the avoidance of headaches question, it's like, all right, but shouldn't we stand on principle? Well, not when it comes to the marriage of a prince, because why have princes? Honestly, what are we doing? Why do we need this trouble? You know what? Why don't you guys just get married and forget about it? Like.
Yeah,
leave
go
us
to
alone.
Vegas.
You're not even like the crown
Elvis.
prince. You're the next guy down the line behind. Like you're 3 back. I'm not going to have an international headache because of you. Go get married.
He's 3rd back now because they fixed the primogeniture thing in England.
Yeah.
At least for the royalty, they need to do it with the peerage.
Okay. that'll solve a lot. I don't know.
They'll avoid all the War of the Roses. There will be no more War of the Roses if they could fix that.
Phew. Because it's close. All right. Well, time to wrap up for today.
Okay.
On the War of the Roses.
Salic law,
I do, but I don't want to offend our French listeners.
Okay.
They still
all right,
stick
David,
by this
have
thing
a
in the
good
rest
one.
of Europe. Okay, thanks. You do the same, and we'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow being Wednesday, we'll have both Joan McCarter with us and Greg Dworkin, assuming that we're not in the special broadcast over the firing of Robert Mueller. Lots more we could have covered. Still want to get to lots that's sticking around in the background. Many more issues, of course. So we'll have a big backup of issues, and then they won't get resolved tomorrow because we'll be talking to Joan and Greg, who will bring us a slightly different grab bag of issues, and thankfully so. That's the reason we have them here, to break up the craziness of my grab bag of issues. And still some issues about issues we've addressed in the past that need more addressing along the way, plus the other players in all of this and the various people violating the law elsewhere that deserve our attention. Let's see. Anything else that we want to add with this one? Let's see, some speculation from Adam Davidson at the New Yorker about the Michael Cohen raid that, I guess just reminding us basically that Michael Cohen is, as he says, the most important non-Trump in the Trump business world. And so many things he oversaw and so many shady deals he helped with. Will any of them eventually come to light because of the raid? Or I guess one might ask, depending on how strictly they adhere to the standards of the scope of the search, maybe they won't be. You could, if you strictly adhere to the scope of the search and the limitation teams who are there. Maybe maybe you're sacrificing your ability to use some of the other evidence that might otherwise come to light if you accidentally or even purposefully seize it during this raid. I don't know. Lots of open questions. Still much more to get to. I'm sorry we didn't move on to other issue areas in a way, but it's interesting and fun to explore these things as deeply as we do sometimes, and hopefully edifying along the way. And definitely getting to a lot of stuff coming up tomorrow. Any more things that we need to shoehorn in before we get out of here? Oh, let's see. Michael Cohen's law firm. Here, a tweet from the Horse Whisperer saying Michael Cohen's law firm, Squire Patton Boggs, I didn't even realize he was affiliated with them, just went full low-level coffee boy on him, saying the firm's arrangement with Mr. Cohen reached its conclusion mutually and in accordance with the terms of the agreement. We have been in contact with federal authorities regarding the execution of the warrant relating to Mr. Cohen. These activities do not relate to the firm. We are in full cooperation. There is a big squeeze play going on here, and it might now become more difficult for him to access $130,000, being that he is being frozen out from both the RNC and the law firm with which he is affiliated. We'll see. Let's see. Other interesting legal developments out there. Kellyanne Conway's husband, George, apparently active on Twitter, undermining Trump's argument on attorney-client privilege. It's not just us. But speaking of not just us, let's see what's coming up with Justice on the program following us immediately on Netroots Radio, the West Coast Cookbook, and Speakeasy. Imagine what you've missed just because of my obsession with Michael Cohen today. Well, they are going to start out, of course, with the raid on Cohen's offices, saying that it was likely the result of a concern that documents and evidence would be destroyed. An exigent circumstances warrant. Then on the rest of the menu, over 300,000 Americans vow to protest in every state when Trump fires Mueller. The special counsel is probing a Ukrainian billionaire's 2015 payment to the Trump Foundation as well.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waltman.
That's right. It was a payment, I think, to the Trump Foundation rather than the organization in exchange for like a 20-minute Skyped-in appearance to a group in the Ukraine. Of course, you'll remember all through the campaign what a horrible thing it was for Hillary Clinton to make paid speeches in exchange, supposedly, for donations to her foundation. Gee whiz. We'll find out more next.